This is the Ballroom State of Mind podcast, episode 110, Life Skills, Boundaries. Hey friends, I'm back. I haven't brought you a podcast in a little bit. I don't know, maybe it's only been about 10 days, but it always feels like a long time to me. But I've had a lot going on. I moved one of my kids into school. Well, she's actually not going to school. I moved her to Utah. She's going to work and eventually go to school. But I drove down there with her and we got her all set up. And then I flew home and I just have had a number of other things going on. And so this took a little bit of a backseat, but I'm back. And I've also been preparing for USDC, which is in just a few days. So I'm so excited for that. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute in the middle of the podcast. But something that I wanted to talk about today came a little bit from Joyful Ballroom, which is my free Facebook group. You should go join it. But it's also from other sessions that I've had with clients. And so I thought this would be useful. It's obviously not going to apply just to your dancing. It's for sure going to apply to your general life. And what I want to talk about today is boundaries. Okay. Now, have you ever informed somebody of what you wanted or needed and they agreed, let's say, and then later they don't adhere to it or they push back or it seems like they ignored it altogether. And then you feel upset because they didn't honor what you told them or they didn't honor what they agreed to. So for example, maybe you told your teacher that you wanted to spend lesson time on preparing for a competition. This is sort of comes from the Facebook group. Is you tell your teacher, oh, I really want to spend our lesson time preparing for this upcoming competition, working on the choreography, making sure you can run it and that you can execute it well and working on some of that technique for that. And then the next time you have a lesson, they bring up wanting to work on the next showcase, like an in-house event, and they want to create some new choreography for that. And that's not what you said. And that's not really what they agreed to if we'd agreed to it. And so it's well, I said this thing, why are they not honoring that? And in your mind, you may not even say anything. And in your mind, you're wait a minute. I just told you I wanted to focus on the competition material. Okay. So that's kind of one example. Another one is you tell your teacher, I just don't want to compete this year. I'm not feeling it. I'm not up for it. And then they keep asking and they keep pushing you to compete. So it's they're pushing against the boundary that you set. Or maybe you tell your partner, you're dancing with your partner and you don't like the way that they're responding to you or they're communicating with you when there's an issue. And it's if you know what, if you continue to do that, I'm going to end the practice session because I'm not enjoying this. And maybe they changed for a hot minute, but then the old responses kick in. Okay. So some of these might be types of things that are just simple requests or preferences. And we have those of our partner, but sometimes these are boundary issues, especially when it comes to our physical or mental or emotional well-being, or the way we're being treated, the way we're being handled, and we don't like it. To me, boundaries are set when we decide what we will or will not stand for in our lives. It's kind of what I'm deciding is okay or is not okay with me. And the thing about boundaries is, and this is where we get it wrong a lot, is boundaries are for us. Boundaries are for us to decide what's okay or not. And we inform the people in our lives about those boundaries, but they are still free to choose to honor them or not. So it's not about controlling them and controlling their behavior. So when we're instigating a boundary, we're not telling other people what to do. And our boundaries are not threats and they're not ultimatums, even though it can feel like that. But when we set boundaries, we're protecting our own space. We're protecting and honoring our personal space, our physical, emotional, mental space. Okay. Boundaries are what we use if another person decides they're not going to honor those parameters that we set. Okay. So note, we can make requests of people. I want you to make requests of people all day long, but they still get to decide to honor those requests or not. And then we get to decide if they're not going to honor our requests, then do we want to continue to participate in the relationship if that's the case? And for me, when it comes to boundaries, this isn't about all these little things that we can set boundaries around. Usually boundaries are kind of a bigger issue. But we can share our preferences and then they get to decide how they respond. And then we get to decide, well, okay, now what? And again, we don't have to set boundaries around every little thing. And when it does feel like that, when it does feel like we're trying to set boundaries around everything, we might be trying to control the people outside of us in order to manage how we're feeling. So we might be setting boundaries and telling people our expectations all the time because we're trying to control them. So note if that's the case. One thing I want to point out when it comes to boundaries is often we're setting them. First of all, we might not be setting them at all, but we also, when we do kind of have them, and we may not even be totally aware that we have them, we're doing it in a wishy-washy way. We are often not clear about it, or we just don't quite mean it. Sometimes we straight up don't communicate them at all. We just expect people to know. And then we're frustrated and shocked when the people in our lives operate in ways that we just wouldn't, right? That's how you know. It's just like, they should just know, right? But other times we do communicate it, maybe kind of loosely. And then when they push back or they don't adhere to it, we don't say anything. We don't bring it up again. We just go along with it. And then later we'll tell everybody who will listen about how we just can't believe that they carried on as usual and can't believe that they didn't do what they said they were going to do, or we can't believe it. Can't believe they said that. Or why would she say that? Or they're so rude, or surely they know how inconsiderate that is. You know, we might say things like, they should know that. I shouldn't have to tell them that. But guess what, people? Everybody in our lives aren't mind readers. They're terrible mind readers. Okay. We have to be clear. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in sessions with clients and we've been talking about something like this. And I've said, okay, well, did you tell them that? And they're like, well, no. It's like, okay, well, like they can't read our minds. Like we got to communicate clearly what our wants and needs are and our expectations are. Now, in reality, they may or may not know about the expectation. And if they do know about the expectation and they still cross it, and we don't do anything about that, we don't uphold the boundary, then it seems like we didn't really mean it. So it wasn't really a boundary at all then. It was negotiable. It was optional because we didn't follow through on the boundary. When we set a boundary, it's like we say what the boundary is, and then if they don't adhere to that boundary, then there's a consequence, which is what we will do. It's not what will happen to them. It's what we will do in response. Okay. So, but it is up to us to be clear with someone. So if we set up a boundary and we say, this is how things are going to go, and this is what's going to happen, this is what I'm going to do if you don't adhere to this boundary. But then when they cross that boundary, we don't follow through, then that wasn't true. Okay. That's on us. It's up to us to be clear. If they cross it, it's our job to hold the boundary. The boundary is for us. It's not their job. Some people will still probably push against it, willingly or not, to see if you mean it. In fact, I just kind of want you to plan that when you set boundaries, we can plan and kind of expect that they're going to test it, knowingly or not. So we don't need to be shocked or surprised when people push against the boundary. That's what a boundary is. We've set an expectation. We've drawn a line in the sand. And it's just like a toddler at times where it's like, don't cross this line. And they like want to put their toe over to see like, well, what's going to happen if I do? Like, do you mean it or not? It really is about if you mean it or not. Okay. Now, let me give you an example. After a couple of experiences last year where we were doing some last minute choreography preparation and development, like at the last minute, like at comps. And it was stressing my nervous system so much. You guys might remember I did a podcast about one of those experiences. It stressed me out so much that my nervous system was fried. So I was like, you know what? I got to set a boundary here. This is not okay. Like, I don't enjoy this. I don't want this. This is not the kind of experience that I want to have. So I'm going to set a boundary. And I didn't call it a boundary or anything. And I didn't like have to like make a big production about it. Just in my own mind, I decided what was okay with me or not okay with me in order to support my own mental and physical and emotional health. I just decided, you know what? I don't want to do any new choreo creation or changes, like big changes up to 2 weeks before the comp, right? It's like, I just want those 2 weeks right before the competition. I just want that to be reps. I just want that to be rounds and reps so that like, I just feel like I really know it. I can't be learning at that point. Right? Especially like right before the competition, like the few days before. No way. Like we're just doing reps at that point. Okay. And of course, my teacher, he's a lot more comfortable with learning things in a very short amount of time, but I'm not. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I want to do. So I don't want to be learning new things. So of course I needed to inform him of this because he is involved. But I didn't call it a boundary. I didn't like make a big deal out of it. I just was like, hey, just so you know, going forward, when we're going to be performing anything, it needs to be completed and finished, like done, like 2 weeks before the performance. Right. And he agreed to that. He was like, okay. And I know that I'm capable of doing it at the last minute. I had just proved it to myself with multiple experiences that year, but I just don't want to. I don't like it. And that's reason enough. So for the next 6 to 7 months, he held to that. Okay. Now, it was coming up time that we were going to have our in-house showcase. So he wanted to prepare some pieces for the showcase, but because of our competition schedule and because we were working so hard on learning new open choreography for those competitions, we did not spend time on creating showcase pieces. So I said to him, we had less than 2 weeks to prepare. And so I said, listen, I am not going to do this showcase. If we have to do new material for this, I'm not going to do it. We're going to have to like take our competition stuff and like morph it into a showcase piece because I'm like, it's less than 2 weeks. And that's the personal boundary I had set for myself. And I was fully prepared to not be in the showcase. And I was okay with that. Okay. That was the boundary. The boundary was like, if we don't have it done and finished 2 weeks before the performance, I won't do the performance. Like I won't do the comp. I won't do the show. That's just what I've decided. It's not an ultimatum. It's not a threat. It's just what I've decided for myself so that I get to still love me and I still get to still love you and I get to enjoy the experience and I'm not going to be mad about it and I'm not going to be mad at you. I've just decided that I'm totally willing to bow out. Now, if you want to take our choreography routines and you want to put it to a certain piece of music and basically not have hardly any changes to it, I can do that. And I'm willing to do that. So that is what we did. Okay. We took my competition routines and we put them to music and we planned to just execute that at the showcase. Again, not a threat, not a punishment to him or anyone if I chose to bow out, just a boundary. So it's like, good job, me. I held to my boundary. So I got to prepare for that in a way that was a lot more enjoyable to me. Of course, it turned out that I got really sick the day of and was in the ER. So I didn't get to perform them at all, but I did hold that boundary. Okay. Now, fast forward a little bit. We're preparing for USDC, right? Which is coming up in a few days. And this was about a month ago. And we have our new cha-cha, rumba, and swing. We've competed them a couple of times. We're feeling pretty good about them. And our bolero is probably our weakest. And we have about a month. So he says, hey, what do you think about adding a little bit to our bolero so that it's more open? And I was in agreement. I was feeling pretty good about the cha-cha, rumba, and swing. And so I was like, yeah, I feel like we could add a couple things to the bolero to make it more open. And we had a month. Now, like in that month, there was 1 week we were both going to be gone. So we really only had 3 weeks. So in my mind, it needed to be pretty minimal what we added to it. So we're about a month out and we're working on it. And the next thing I know, it really does feel like it's becoming a whole new routine. We spent a couple of lessons on it. And I could feel that my anxiety was raising because I was like, wait a minute, this is like new choreography. And we basically are like running short on time. And I don't want to have to try to remember this. And we're talking about USDC here, which is, where we want to be as polished as we can be. And so we're in the middle of working on it. And I just had to stop him. And I was like, wait a minute, like what is happening? Because this is really pushing it. This is not going to be done 2 weeks before. And it was like, I'm going to be gone next week. You're going to be gone next week. And so we're only going to have a couple of lessons to really solidify this. And I'm just not willing to try to remember all of this. Like I thought we were just going to add a couple things to the bolero and we talked about it and we like worked it out and we made some compromises. It was sort of in the middle where it was like, we kept some of our routine and we changed a little bit, which was kind of what I was expecting. But also I wasn't kind of willing to back out of USDC. So I made some compromises kind of on my boundary, but I did stand up for my boundary. I did say, hold on, wait a minute. This is going in a direction that was not what we talked about. Okay. And I could have flat out said that I'm unwilling to do anything new. We're going to do our closed bolero and it's fine. And I could have held that boundary strongly. But I had my own reasons for choosing to compromise on my boundary a little bit, but that's up to me. Right. And so the point I want to make is when we set a boundary, it's for us and it's to inform our behavior and what we will do or not do. It's not to control their behavior. But the result is that we teach people in our lives what we are or are not okay with. Okay, so we are teaching them how to treat us. We are teaching them how to handle us, and we are teaching them what's not okay. And if they aren't willing or able to handle us in the ways that we prefer, then we will probably go our separate ways eventually. Or at times we might decide to relax our own expectations because that relationship is valuable to us and we value what they bring to the relationship. And so we're willing to be okay with some things and just relax our expectations or just decide that that's okay. And that can happen too. Which, for example, is like if we had a friend who was continually late all the time or would like make plans with us to go to lunch and then they would like no show. Okay. We don't have to like kick them out of our lives and be like, well, you just don't respect me and you don't respect my time. And we don't even have to be angry about it. We can just go, I don't want to wait around. So I'm going to let them know, hey, I'm excited to meet you for lunch. I'm so excited about this. But just so you know, I know that sometimes you run late. So I want you to know I'm willing to wait 15 minutes for you, but then I'm going to leave. And I'm not going to be mad at you and I'm not going to be upset with you. I just don't want to wait around more than 15 minutes. And this still gives them room to be them. We're not telling them that they have to be there on time. They can still be late if they're going to be late, but we are letting them know my boundary is I'm willing to wait 15 minutes and then I'm going to leave. And I'm making you aware of it so you don't feel like I ditched you or whatever, but like you still get to be you and I'm not going to be mad or upset with you being you, but I am going to also take care of my own time and mental health and what I'm willing to do and all that. Okay. One of the reasons that we struggle with boundaries is because of people pleasing. And I'll probably do a separate episode on that, another life skills episode on people pleasing, because it's so prevalent in all of y'all when I talk to you. And, we don't want to upset people, which makes sense. And we think that by not doing what they want, that they're going to be upset or reject us. So we will go with what they want, but we'll silently be seething and growing resentful and angry. And rather than have that other person be uncomfortable by me saying like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do that, or I'm not okay with that, or no, thank you. Rather than having them be uncomfortable with me saying no, we choose to let ourselves be uncomfortable. We'll say yes to something or agree with something or go with something or not push back on something. But then we'll just hold the discomfort of, doing something that we don't really want to do and going along with what they want, but we're going to be uncomfortable instead of them. But what I want you to know is that's based on a lie. When you betray your own boundaries and you go with what other people want, when it's to your detriment and you don't really want to do it, you're saying that what is happening is okay with you when it isn't. Okay, that relationship isn't authentic because you aren't telling the truth. You might think that if you're holding a boundary or you're disagreeing or you're saying no to something, that they're going to think you're rude or bad or uncaring. And so you approve or you go along with it and you pretend to be okay with it. You pretend to be okay with what's happening. But then notice you actually are being rude and uncaring by how you think about them. And you're just doing it silently in your mind after you've left or whatever, and they don't know about it. But you are being rude and uncaring. I want to point out that none of this has to be done from a place of like threat or anger or frustration, or even an energy of standing up for yourself. If you're thinking about this in a way that's like, I got to stand up for myself, or I don't like confrontation, or I don't like conflict, then I know you're seeing this as if you like kind of need to go into battle. Like it's you against me. And if you feel that way, then you've probably been people pleasing and you haven't been setting boundaries, or you haven't been communicating them or honoring them. And so you've built up some of this resentment and anger. That doesn't have to be the case. You can get yourself to a place of love and understanding and connection. Expectations and boundaries can be set with kindness. You don't even have to tell someone specifically that there's a boundary in place if you don't want to, because it is for you. It informs your behavior. And I recommend you do it at times. You do inform them of it when it makes sense. You communicate it anyway in what you say yes to and what you say no to, and mean it. And when you say something and you follow through on it, then you're showing that you mean it and you're communicating that boundary without making a big production about it. I want you to know it's okay to have boundaries. In fact, it's necessary and it's healthy. Boundaries actually help your relationships be real. They help your relationships be authentic and honest. You might think it's putting a wedge between people or it's disconnecting them, but the opposite is true. Notice when you're people pleasing and you're going along with things that you don't really want to go along with, you're lying. Okay, your relationship's based on a lie. You connect with people when you tell the truth. And by the way, if we're in relationships where people continually cross our boundaries, then they should definitely fall out of our lives. We just might not be a want match. That's where what I want and what you want match up. Okay. And if we aren't a want match, then what are we even doing here? Lastly, boundaries are what allow us to love everyone in the story. That means them and you, because when you're not telling the truth and you're people pleasing, then you are not loving you. Okay. So it's the place from which I get to love you and me. And if you ever have to actually have a boundary conversation or someone has one with you, I want you to remember this, that it means that we want to be in each other's lives. If somebody's having a boundary conversation with you, it means they want you in your life because they don't have to have that conversation. If they don't like what's happening at any time, this is true for you too. If you don't like what's happening in a relationship, you don't have to have that conversation at all. You can just deem that relationship as complete and move on and ghost even. And people can ghost you. They can just decide it's not worth having the conversation and they can just move on. So if you're having this conversation with someone or they're having a conversation with you where we got to just like set some boundaries, it means we want to make this work and we want to be more connected and we want to have more of an authentic relationship. And I want to be truthful with you. And we can work on this so that we can stay in each other's lives. That means I value you or that they value you. Okay. Because if they weren't wanting to stay connected, again, they could just ghost you. So don't see those conversations necessarily as conflict. Okay. It's about connecting. You guys, boundary work is so life-changing. And I want to tell you that the more you do this work and you set kind of boundaries in little ways, and the more that you do it and practice it, it becomes more and more comfortable and it becomes more and more easy to do. And the more that you honor your own boundaries, the more that you honor the boundaries in others. And these are the kinds of relationships that feel so good. They're just honest and true and authentic, and you know where you stand with people and you know how to treat them and they know how to treat you. And it's beautiful. It's work worth doing. So do some of this boundary work. And if you need help with it, you need assistance with it, it is challenging, especially if you would identify yourself as a people pleaser, which I hate labels, but if you're going to call yourself a people pleaser and you identify with that, you need some extra help with this probably. So you should do a dance strategy call with me. Okay. I always link it in the show notes. And as of now, they're still free. That's going to change. Things are going to be changing, but let me help you with this. This is some of the most life-changing work you can do. Okay. All right. That's what I have for you today. And hopefully I'm going to see you at USDC. I'm going to be competing at the open level and I'm a little anxious about it because last year I won for closed gold. And so I'm moving up a level and some of my choreography is relatively new. You know, I haven't been working on it for 2 years or whatever. So fingers crossed, I'm doing all my mental strength work. I'm doing a lot of visualizing right now. I'm doing a lot of like making sure that I'm talking to myself in a way that's positive and constructive. And maybe I can talk about that a little bit more on another episode, but that's what I have for you today. Catch you next time.